Hey friends, today I'm going to talk about fear, anxiety, and also avoidance, and then some more of my favorite coping skills. So, most of you know I am a professional counselor and I work a lot with people who are struggling with anxiety. I also have a story of a personal struggle with anxiety, so it's something I'm pretty familiar with professionally and personally. And uh, usually people who've experienced anxiety, you kind of know right away that there's a thought component, there's a physiological component, there's an emotional part. There's a lot of different ways that anxiety manifests itself. And often for people who have not had that experience, it's really hard to understand. And very well-meaning, caring people will say things like, well, just don't think about that, or well, don't worry about that. That's not going to happen. That's not a big deal. Just don't worry about that. And that they struggle to have compassion because they haven't experienced how intense anxiety can be, how paralyzing anxiety can be, how much it can really impact you and take away from your everyday functioning. So also when I talk about anxiety, in part because if you haven't had that experience, it's really difficult to understand that it's not just worries, it's not just thoughts about concerning things happening, that really it's an experience that happens that impacts your body, your mind, and your emotions. So our brains, they don't differentiate between imagined threat and real threat. So if I experience an actual threat, I run into a bear at Rock Cut, my body will go into fight or flight. My brain will tell my body, you need to be ready to fight or to run to survive. I can actually get my body to do the same thing by thinking about a difficult conversation, by considering finances or difficulty with finances, or thinking about a health problem, or even something that's happening with someone else. I can think of a situation that feels concerning to me, and if I think about it long enough, if I think about it deeply enough, I can actually get my body to do the same thing. I can put my body into fight or flight. Now, I'm not experiencing an actual threat, but my brain doesn't differentiate that. It just knows there's a threat, there's danger, and so we need to trigger the fight or flight system so that she can survive. And that's when you really experience a host of things physically, that and it's different for different people. And so often when I'm working with people, we'll kind of explore, where do you feel anxiety in your body? For me, it's usually in my stomach, and I get headaches, and I have trouble sleeping. Those are the top things that happen when I'm really struggling with anxiety. But I've worked with a lot of people who get chest pain, who sometimes will have racing heart. And those are also things that are a little bit more common with what we would call a panic attack. And it's very common for people who are experiencing a panic attack to actually go to the ER to seek medical treatment, because they are so sure that they're having a heart attack. That's the level of the pain in their chest. That's the way that their heart is beating, how they just feel unable to catch their breath. There's this incredible fear and pressure, to the point that they seek medical attention because it's that serious what they're experiencing. So I know people who will have even those symptoms on a lower level with their chronic anxiety. They might just have an achy chest. They might have weird fluctuations in their heart rate. They might just hold tension in different places in their body. If I get people where they just have chronic pain in their shoulders or in their neck, because that's where they hold their tension. So usually there are a lot of ways that anxiety can show up in the body, and then also that can create more anxiety, because when you're having these persistent physical symptoms, then you can start to think, oh my gosh, what if there's something really wrong with me? What if there's something wrong with my heart? What if there's something really wrong with my stomach? Maybe I have an ulcer. Is there a tumor in my brain? Why am I getting these headaches? That it can generate more anxiety, and now you're in a vicious cycle, because your brain keeps triggering your fight or flight system to stay activated because it's perceiving all this threat. And then you're getting all of these physical symptoms because your fight or flight system is activated. And that's then telling your brain that there are other problems that it should be concerned about. So all of that to say, anxiety is really, really hard. And the way the fight or flight system works, your brain doesn't work well when it's engaged because we want to survive. So we don't want to take the time to use the frontal cortex. You just want to react. Well, when you're actually making important decisions or you're trying to take care of yourself, you need your frontal cortex because that's where all of your problem solving skills are, your thinking skills, all the things that you're going to need to be able to cope well are there. So what are some really simple ways that you can calm down if your anxiety is activated, if your fight or flight system is activated? One of my favorite ones is breathing. Just breathing. There are different techniques. Some people like box breathing. Some people like to count. You count, you breathe into the count of 3, you breathe out to the count of 6. There are different ways to do it. There's not a right or a wrong way, really. It's finding something that works for you. Personally, I usually like to breathe in through my nose to the count of 3 and breathe out through my mouth to the count of 6. I also will often try to hold my breath both at the top of the inhale and at the bottom. And I will also a lot of times do praying in partnership with my breathing. I find praying to be very powerful, to be very soothing. And so when I combine those two, when I pray as I breathe, almost always it will bring a measure of calm. It will bring a measure of peace. It will help me to deactivate enough that I can start to get my frontal cortex back online, and then I can determine, is there actually a problem, or was this just kind of a fluky moment? If there is a problem, okay, what am I going to do now to solve the problem? What is needed? And now I have access to my decision-making skills, my problem-solving skills, and I can also probably access some other tools if I need them. That might be when I would also do some gratitude practice like I talked about last time, just to continue to move me out of that place of stress and into a place of peace. I might also do some movement in my body because I tend to be kind of a tightener. I might just, kind of shake off. I might put on some music to help me relax my body. I might take a walk if that's a possibility. I might go take a nap if that's a possibility. So there are different things like that. But usually for me, a big key one to get through that initial burst of anxiety is some breathing. I usually partner that with some prayer, and then that moves me into where I can do some of these other things. Now, at the beginning, I said that I wanted to talk about anxiety, but also avoidance. So a lot of anxiety, the general heading that I talk about with that is fear and avoidance. So whenever there's anxiety, there's a fear of something, a fear of lack, a fear of loss, a fear of injury, a fear of punishment, some kind of fear. And the way that we feel safe from that is we take some kind of avoidance to help us feel safe from the fear. So if I'm afraid that something is wrong with me medically, I might either avoid going to see the doctor because then I know that they're going to tell me that this is true. Or I might insist on going to see the doctor to avoid the uncertainty of possibly having something wrong with me medically and not knowing it. If I'm really worried about finances, I might avoid looking at my checkbook, balancing it, working a budget. I might just not even want to know what's in there so that I can feel safe from a fear of lack, from a fear of not having enough finances. Or I might do the opposite. I might scrutinize that. I might be really into budgets. I might want to know every single cent where it's at so that I can feel safe from the threat of financial failure or financial lack. But whenever we're using fear and avoidance, we are trapping ourselves. Avoidance is really only good as a short-term response to fear. In the long term, what it does is it just gets us all tangled up. Because if you have to use avoidance to reduce this fear, well, now I can't do these things because I'm avoiding. Well, then I'll probably develop new fears because my functioning is different. Well, then I'm going to have to develop new avoidances. And now the things that I can't do is even more. So the opportunity for me to have fears because I'm functioning even more differently increases that much more. And pretty soon you're just super tangled in fear and avoidance. So why am I talking about all of these things? Well, a lot of us have fear. Maybe we don't have clinical anxiety, but we have an experience of fear. Just living in this world, it happens. And often we're tempted to avoid. This is our culture promotes this, hey, don't worry about it, check out, numb out, you don't need to face your fears. And we put them to the side. We use avoidance. And then before we know it, we are totally tangled up in fear and avoidance, and we're not living and we're not free, and we probably are having physical symptoms. We probably are very preoccupied mentally. We probably are experiencing some distress in our emotions. And so this is a great opportunity, if this is you, to also use some of these skills. As you become aware of it, try some breathing, try some praying, try some gratitude, try some moving your body, talking through these things. Try using some skills instead of avoidance so that you're able to move through those fears and care for yourself so that they can be processed and dismissed appropriately rather than just tangling you in avoidance. So if this is you, I want to encourage you to try some of these things. And then I'm going to plan to talk more about other things that we can do to not just cope skillfully in the moment, but how do we put truth back into that system to try and stop this cycle even further.